I am going to say let's get started because we have so much to get through today that we want to share with you about our brand new data solutions here at Fearless Futures. I'm really excited to get started. So yeah, very warm welcome to everyone. This webinar is to celebrate the launch of Fearless Data Solutions. And I am here with two wonderful people that I'm very excited to introduce you to. I'm here with Laurie Jevons, who is Fearless Futures Director of Operations, who is kindly standing in for Sable Lomax, who's unfortunately not well today. So very appreciative of you being here with us today, Laurie. We are also joined by Emily Bryant, who is Head of Brand and Marketing at Amberjack, who will be sharing some insights into how Amberjack partnered with Fearless Futures this year to elevate the D&I insights in their graduate recruitment applicant data. So very excited to chat a bit more with you, Emily, very shortly. I should introduce myself. My name's Ruby. I'm Director of Consultancy and Data Solutions over here at Fearless Futures. And yeah, excited to share with you all a bit about what our data solutions is, what it looks like, and the different use cases that it has. Laurie has the fun role of asking me questions today. Laurie's going to be our MC, so that I can share some of those details with you, how data solutions works, why we built it in the first place, different opportunities that it might offer for your unique context. So let me open some slides so that we have some visual cues, and I'll make sure that I speak through the slides as well. I should say that we will have some time at the end for Q&A. So at the bottom of your screen, there's a little Q&A function, and you can share your questions with us as we're moving through. Don't feel that you need to wait until the very end. Share your questions as they come to you, and we will try our very best to get through as many as possible at the end. I should also say that this webinar is recorded, but because it's a webinar format, none of you are visible, your names aren't visible, anything like that. It will just be myself and our wonderful speakers. So let's get into it. Laurie, the mic is yours. I'm going to hand over to you, and I'll bring up some slides. I know you've got lots of questions for me.
I do. And Ruby, as you're bringing up slides, I think the best place for us to start is to really have you tell us in a nutshell what Fearless Data Solutions is all about.
Very good question to start. What is it all about? So we do a couple of things through our data solutions. We collect, analyze, and evaluate data and design tailored data-driven solutions and progress measurements for diversity, equity, and inclusion in organizations, so that DEI data can actually catalyze real change in outcomes. We know that leaders want to be able to demonstrate progress on DEI and to go further than sort of just tracking diversity demographics and reporting on these year on year, to go further and make data really function for change. So we wanted to develop a robust and an innovative service to support ambitious organizations to use evidence, to use metrics, and to be able to use the best-in-class data methodologies in order to catalyze inclusion in their context. So we have developed an innovative and what's actually a very flexible methodology that underpins all of our data solutions, which means that because it's flexible, but a very sound methodology, there's many sort of use cases for our services that allow us to diagnose and to solution for DEI across people, policy, product, and across service. So in short, I suppose you said in a nutshell, we make data work for inclusion, if I can summarize it in a sentence.
That's a great introduction, Ruby. Can you tell us more about why you developed data solutions? What problems does it help us solve?
So many different problems, unique problems and problems that are shared in different organizations when it comes to sort of solving DE&I issues. like I sort of mentioned above, often when we talk about DEI data, it's sort of taken to mean quite simply numbers, like quantifiable numbers, representation data, if you like, as the be all and end all of DEI data. But we know that it's much more than that. And we might think of that kind of representation workforce data as the D in DE and I data. So diversity data, how diverse are our teams? What are the numbers? And that is useful data for sure, but often without the equity and inclusion data, so the E and I of DE and I data, what tends to happen is we end up with quite a limited picture of what is going on in our organization, and therefore we end up with a limited ability to create measurable changed outcomes. So when we focus on the D of DE and I data alone, we're often ending up with quite a limited picture. And that, of course, informs what we're able to do, where we're able to solution. So we can think of the DE and I as sort of three pillars of data. We have diversity data, like I mentioned, the workforce demographics, who's in our teams, who's in leadership. Equity data is then the data on which identities and groups in your organization amongst your stakeholders have fair and equitable access to success, to opportunities across your company. And then we have inclusion data. How included do people feel? What's their experience within your organization? So if you like, diversity data is sort of outcome data, but equity and inclusion data tells us the why behind the numbers. And we need that to create effective solutions more often than not. So, why are we not recruiting or retaining women, for example? Why do disabled colleagues never seem to make it to leadership? Where do we need to direct energy to create change as quickly as possible? So when we have these questions, some of the ways that we go about using DEI data to answer these is, it's very varied, but a couple of examples is looking at employee experience, right? Surveying employees to measure their experience in the organization, their perceptions of inclusion. We also do policy impact assessments, so really understanding how do your processes and your structures further inclusion for different groups or reduce inclusion, where are their barriers? We do pay equity analysis across a range of demographics, as well as stakeholder impact analysis, which is a really exciting way to use data to inform the way you design and deliver your products and services, all the way through to global DEI strategies, and sometimes a whole combination of these, like in our ecosystem audit. So why did we create Fearless Data Solutions? What problems does it solve? I think was your question, Laurie. By revealing the data, the DE and I data behind those sorts of questions that I mentioned, we can then do things like redesign our recruitment, our onboarding, our progression processes in order to attract and retain talent, right, which is so important for employers, and develop strategy that is global, regional specificity, but also with global standards that creates that cohesion across an ecosystem, and develop a sort of cohesive way for us to measure and track progress, which is really important for accountability in organizations. So I suppose in some, we created these solutions to make diversity, equity, and inclusion data a tool for real change, rather than just a sort of conversation or a snapshot to really kind of change and create inclusive outcomes.
So it sounds like you're combining many different elements to really look at and address specific problems and create DEI goals.
Yeah, exactly. It's that combination of different services and tools in order to tailor it to the specific needs that we find in a given organizational context.
Great. Take us behind the scenes, Ruby. Tell us what Fearless Data Solutions are in essence.
In essence, so we enable our clients to do a number of different things. We, first of all, one of the most important things that an innovative and a robust methodology allows for is identifying disparities. And in fact, let me bring a slide up here as I speak through this. You know, a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion work ends up being rooted in guesswork and sort of assumptions ultimately about where issues are and where those disparities lie for different communities represented in your organization. And so therefore where those barriers to inclusion are. But guesswork is of course not very effective. It's much less effective a use of our resources than being directed by evidence, by the data from a specific organizational ecosystem, because every organization is unique and requires unique solutions. So through employee surveying, pay equity analysis, policy assessments, we are able to identify specific disparities and dynamics and identify those factors that are contributing to inequities in organizations and also the opportunities, right? So it's identifying disparities and also where the opportunities lie. And that's really essential for addressing these issues effectively. And when we have a strong evidence base and we know where the barriers and the enablers are, if you like, then we can empower our clients to make better, more informed, more effective decisions. You know, high quality, accurate, comprehensive DEI data enables organizations and enables leaders to make really informed decisions about the solutions and initiatives that they want to invest in and sequencing and prioritization. And that resource allocation question is something that comes up all the time. You know, leaders often say to me, like, where do I start or where do I go next? How do I know where I need to invest energy or energize my team to invest energy? And having an evidence base to make those decisions is really key. And that allows us to support clients to tailor solutions, you know, having evidence to not only think about where you invest your resource and your energy, but also the specifics of what solutions are going to work. So it's not just that we are supporting clients to reveal where to direct their energy and resource, but also to create solutions for problems that they deeply understand. And in that way, I think what's really exciting is DEI data and Fearless Data Solutions can really generate innovation in DEI efforts across teams. So it's not just about finding out what's going on, but really tailoring solutions that are going to drive change as quickly as possible. And then finally, measuring progress. Again, this is something that comes up in my conversations with clients all the time. You know, employees, clients, stakeholders, they expect organizations to demonstrate accountability for DEI progress, right? And often people ask me, how do we actually demonstrate accountability for DEI? And to put it really simply, it means being able to show how you are creating tangible change along diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? And without reliable data and effective tools, it's very challenging to measure progress. And I think this can be a real inhibitor for organizations. So robust DEI analytics and metrics provide this baseline for measuring progress over time.
And Ruby, I think there's a much higher expectation on employers today to demonstrate that really meaningful commitment to DEI. Mission statements don't just cut it anymore.
Yeah.
So can you tell us more about the benefits for employers of investing in DEI data solutions?
This is such a great question because, I mean, there is, I think you're absolutely right, Laurie, there is increasing pressure on employers to go beyond saying this is what we want to do or this is what we're committed to, and actually being able to demonstrate how you're shifting the dial, what levers you're pulling to create change. And so there are a couple of benefits that I'll highlight for employers in investing in DEI data solutions. Again, that kind of holistic approach, diversity, equity, and inclusion data. First of all, it enhances employee engagement. Why? It sounds obvious, but we know that when employees see that their organization is actively investing in data to drive change, in cultivating or generating an evidence base for the solutions that are being invested in, it can really boost morale. And that has positive impacts then on team cohesion and, of course, on productivity and innovation within teams. And then we also see that there is an additional benefit of attracting and retaining talent. So, a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion that is supported by data can really help organizations to attract and retain a diverse workforce. As you said, prospective employees and also increasingly clients are more and more looking to organizations to demonstrate how they prioritize, how they measure, and how they progress and improve DEI. So in that sense, I think data is really the most convincing story you can tell, I suppose. And I think very connected to that actually is improving brand sustainability and kind of brand image. Because I think companies that demonstrate a very genuine and evidenced commitment to DE&I through data-driven initiatives and those measurable objectives are really able to enhance their reputation. It cultivates trust amongst stakeholders. And so I think it can be a real competitive advantage beyond actually, the internal changes that it can create and attracting diverse talent. There's also that importance about who you are in the world and how you're perceived by stakeholders. So there's lots of other, I think, benefits in investing in data solutions, but yeah, they're the ones that I think I'll highlight.
Thanks, Ruby. So this webinar really serves as the official launch of Fearless Data Solutions, but you and your team have been working on really exciting projects behind the scenes over the past few months. I know everyone on the webinar today will be really excited to hear from our speaker, Emily Bryant from Amberjack, about how you've partnered to unlock those deep insights in Amberjack's recruitment data.
Absolutely. I think there's no one better who can speak to some of the strengths and opportunities that our data solutions has enabled. So I'm very excited to welcome Emily Bryant from Amberjack. I'll actually take the slides away for this so we can just be in conversation, Emily. So Emily, very warm welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us. So folks, Emily is head of brand and marketing at Amberjack, and Emily has worked in the early career sector for her entire career, so a real expert. Her first role at graduate recruitment website Milkround introduced Emily to the world of early careers, and since then she's worked also both agency side and in-house for RBS. And this has given her the opportunity to work with a wide range of organizations across multiple sectors, and also experience job roles within attraction, recruitment, and development. Currently, Emily works for Amberjack and sits on the operational board. And Amberjack operate predominantly in the early careers sector, providing award-winning end-to-end solutions for their 100 plus clients globally. Emily's role as head of brand and marketing involves continuing to build the Amberjack brand, as well as effectively positioning their broad range of products and services within existing and new target markets. So we're so pleased to have you, Emily. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Be excited to be part of the launch. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a couple of questions for you to share with our listeners today, a bit about the work that we were able to do together, which honestly has been one of the absolute highlights of my year. So to start us off, can you tell us a bit about why you first sought Fearless Futures and Fearless Data Solutions? What was the problem you were seeking to solve?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess just first and foremost, I actually met Hannah, obviously founder of Fearless Futures, when I was working in-house at RBS. So and followed her success as she launched the organisation. So I was really excited that we were able to talk to you about this project. So as Ruby said, just to give a little bit of context, Amberjack work predominantly within the early talent space. We work with numerous organisations across multiple sectors to help them attract, assess and recruit and develop early talent. So that includes both graduates and apprentices. And our sector is I would say quite innovative. They're hugely passionate about this space and are always hungry for more data and insights. And each year we use our own data, so that actually comes from one of our products called AmberTrack, which is essentially an applicant tracking system to help organisations manage candidates through the process. And each year that data is analysed anonymously. So we can help give insights and real sort of commitment and recommendations to our clients, but also to the broader sector. That data is usually around 300,000 candidate applications, which is a huge data set. And we've been looking at that data for around 11, 12 years. So, and each year we get great insight, and, you know, we've always, you know, enjoyed sharing that with our clients in the broader sector, but we also had a feeling that we could delve deeper into that data. And that's where Fearless Futures came in. So had a fantastic, you know, first conversation with Ruby and Hannah, and they talked to me in depth about the intersectional methodology that they applied, and it all just seemed to sort of fit together. And I think, you know, we were really excited that even though the data we'd produced previously in the other years was really helpful, we thought that extra layer of analysis would allow us to, you know, be even more confident when we're talking to clients and making recommendations about what their strategy should look like and help them to achieve their goals and objectives. So in a nutshell, that's why we chose to work with you.
Thanks so much, Emily. And I have to say, in our first conversation, hearing about the commitment of your team to really understanding the dynamics in your data and how long actually that commitment has been within your team and in your organization, and hearing how big this data set was and how rich the data set was, me and my team were so excited about the opportunity to, exactly as you said, like dig a bit deeper and unlock deeper insights and sort of bring that demographic data together to see what else was hiding under the surface, and kind of meet that ongoing commitment that your team has had of like really driving DEI for your clients and also for your industry, which is super exciting.
Yeah, and I should say that, you know, this comes from a real desire for the organisations that we work with to drive change, and I think it's a really dynamic and exciting area, early careers, and also an area that can have huge impact on an organisation. So just the volume of this, you know, this group of talent that they're bringing into their organizations, and if they can get that right in terms of the blend of and diversity of individuals that they're bringing into their organization, that can have such, you know, amazing long-term impact. So, you know, it's a great sector to be in, an exciting sector to be in, and that's why everyone's so passionate and really, you know, really wants that data and analysis to use for their own strategies. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, I suppose the next question I have for you that I think will reveal a bit more about what we did together and how it served those needs that you're speaking to is, I suppose, what did you find the most powerful and perhaps useful in the insights that we revealed that went into the report?
Yeah, so I think this is almost a pretty easy question to answer, in that the data that we'd had, and I mentioned it earlier, the data that we'd always analysed had been, I don't say one-dimensional, but we hadn't got the intersectional methodology that that Fearless Futures were able to apply. So I think each year we were looking at different demographic groups. You know, we were seeing improvements in some areas and not progress in others. And actually, you know, where there was progress, was that really the true picture? Was that telling us a realistic story? And where there wasn't improvement, why not? Why can't we do more? Where is it that, you know, organisations are not hitting the mark? Because there's no, you know, lack of desire to make change. You know, early talent, you know, people are looking at every single way that they can, you know, improve this for students coming into their organisations. So I think one thing for me that really stood out was when we looked at the data from Russell Group versus non-Russell Group universities. So just to give you, I guess, a flavour of the data that we are analysing, we're looking at candidate data. So we're looking at gender identities, we're looking at ethnic background, we're looking at what universities they went to, what courses they're studying, etc., etc. So a real deep data set that we're looking to analyse. But the Russell Group, to give you an example, the Russell Group versus non-Russell Group piece was really interesting. So high level, students from Russell Group universities are 2.5 times more likely to get a job offer than non-Russell Group universities, which tells a story and a picture in its own right. But actually, what we then went to look at was sort of that, you know, layering on that intersectional methodology. We looked at students from different ethnic backgrounds and then how they were performing. And actually, at Russell Group universities, what we saw was a Black candidate was as likely to get a job offer as a white candidate. But when you looked at non-Russell Group universities, Black candidates were disproportionately disadvantaged, which is a whole different story and a whole different you know, challenge in itself. And I think that was almost like a light bulb moment for us in terms of we do our best to advise and support clients in terms of how they engage their students, how they work with universities, but it isn't a one size fits all. So, you know, what you're doing at a Russell Group university is not potentially what you should be doing at a non-Russell Group university. So all of a sudden, there were these different groups that we could really sort of look at in their own right and think about, actually, how do we then build in a strategy to best support those students who are at the moment disproportionately disadvantaged? And I think for me, that was, you know, fascinating, worrying, but exciting that we had that data so we could make change. And I think that's what has been so brilliant about this piece of work, is that we feel confident that we are delving into it in enough detail to be able to advise our clients in the right way, and also share with the broader sector, because we're a very collaborative sector, and it's great to be able to share those findings with other organisations who we don't currently work with as well. So
love that, Emily. Thank you so much for giving us such I feel like you zoomed us all the way into the research with that example, and really, I think, illuminates the power of intersectionality in unlocking really crucial insights, which, you know, exactly as you pointed to, sometimes what looks like a positive trend or a trend in one direction, when you start to layer on other factors and you look at those factors as joint factors, so you look at gender and race together, or you look at disability status together and education background, the trends can go in different directions for different groups within a group. So
yeah,
you have starts to look really different. And I really just want to underline how I think relatable it is what you shared about sometimes you start to see trends that you thought it was positive, but for this community it's not, and that can feel like worrying because you don't want to see the trends. But actually it's so exciting because it starts to really give us direction of where to start thinking about certain targeted solutions, new solutions, innovative solutions. So love that. And the Amberjack annual D&I trends report came out 2 weeks ago, just under 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
So exciting. How's the reception been? I'm really interested in how the reception's been, and yeah, how did it land?
Yeah, really well. So I think obviously you were, you know, you joined us at the launch webinar, which was fantastic. And I think, again, what has been great about this project is collaborating with yourselves, data experts, DEI experts, to help us really get the most from this data. And I think our industry responds well to that. I think we can't be brilliant at everything, and I think by bringing in your expertise has really changed the dial in terms of just obviously the insights, but also educating the sector a little bit more about the importance and all the stuff that you said at the beginning of the session. I feel like we should be shouting that to our sector as well. And that's not to say some organisations aren't doing it, because they will be, and it's a pretty progressive area of recruitment and development. But I do think there's so much more that we could do. But in terms of the report, I think the stats speak for themselves, to be honest. So we've seen a 42% uptick in reports, the requests for the reports this year, because of that richness of data. We've had some absolutely fantastic one-to-one sessions with our clients, because we've been able to sort of really delve into their own specific data and do some really good sector analysis as well. So, what they're getting is just this extra depth and layer of data that they haven't had necessarily from us previously. And that all just builds to a better relationship with our clients. It just helps us to inform, what they should be doing. And therefore, they go into the new recruitment season feeling that, they're well informed in what they have in place in terms of their, whatever part of the strategy it is, whether it's attraction, assessment, is right for them, and they're doing the right things. And ultimately, DE&I is the biggest challenge for early talent recruiters. So as part of the insights report, as well as analysing candidate data, we also do an employer survey. And apart from the challenges of the COVID years, DE&I is number one challenge for these employers year on year. And so, the more that we can do with this data to help inform them and help them, then the better. So it's landed really well. I think, what I'm excited about is, continuing, Ruby, on this journey with you and looking at individual sectors as well, because there's such different challenges with say engineering versus law versus professional services versus retail. There's such a broad blend of challenges, even just within DEI. So lots more to do, but I think the initial analysis has landed really well for us.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. And yeah, I mean, echoing you, so excited to kind of continue this journey to serve a variety of needs and opportunities. And I think what came out to me as well, and what you were sharing, Emily, is the partnerships that we're able to build and that we've been able to build with you is really a combination of our expertise, yes, in data solutions, in diversity, equity, and inclusion in organizational context, and your unique insights and expertise into your sector. And when we're able to kind of bring those together, it really unlocks opportunity to create change, which is so incredibly exciting. So thank you so much for being with us and sharing your insights and your expertise. And I can't wait to continue the journey. So thank you so much, Emily.
No problem. Thanks for having me again.
A pleasure. So look, we have a bit of time left. I know you have a few more questions, so I'm passing the mic back over to you.
I do have some questions, but if any questions are coming up for anyone that's on the call, please put them in the chat. We do have a Q&A at the end of the webinar. But Ruby, in the meantime, can you share with us a bit more about other ways we've combined our services to support organizational unique DE&I goals?
I can, Laurie. So I think, as you said earlier, this is the official celebration launch of our Fearless Data Solutions, but we have been working in the background on some really exciting projects. So it'd be a pleasure to share with our audience today what some of those projects have looked like. We are under NDA with most of our clients, so I can't share names, but I can share some of our successes. So let me find my share screen. And there we go. So some of the things that we've done already this year, some really, really exciting projects. We partnered with a venture capital firm earlier this year to support the redesign of their overarching diversity data collection framework. So we evaluated their existing approach and developed a holistic inclusion criteria for their data collection framework. And that was to support the company in meeting its mission, its DEI goals, to invest in founders from marginalized backgrounds and really champion portfolios that support DE&I. So that was really exciting to sort of be in the weeds of methodology and bring that to life in a way that suited their needs. The sociologist data nerd in me absolutely loved kind of getting into the weeds of that. And yeah, so that was a wonderful project, a really holistic inclusion criteria that helped them to sort of measure, their pipeline more effectively. We also consulted with a global design company earlier this year, who were engaged in international user experience research project, and we developed some really exciting inclusive recruitment strategies that were able to achieve a much more diverse participant pool across race, ethnicity, gender, faith. And so we were focused on their outreach strategy, looking at their sort of interview techniques and design. And we also supported the team on the user research team, I should say, on inclusive research practice in order to support the kind of sustainability and innovation in their team, in their services in the future. So that was really exciting to see sort of the longevity of working with this holistic DEI data paradigm. And yeah, it was a wonderful project. Both of those, I wish I could share more about who the client is, but that's kind of the nuts and bolts of some of the projects that have been a real highlight for us this year.
There will be a time I will be able to find the unmute button. Today is maybe not that day. Did any of these involve people analytics?
No, these did actually. I'm really glad you asked, Laurie, because these didn't, but we have done some very exciting people analytics this year as well. And yes, you're guiding me to my next slide. So thank you, Laurie. You're ahead of the game. We supported a global consumer goods company through, that should say capability, not sapability. I don't know how I've managed to do that. It was an inclusion skills analysis project that was focused on enhancing DEI capability through strategy. So we designed and delivered an equity and inclusion skills questionnaire to assess the distribution, the skill level, and the patterns of capability across their DEI council. And so we surveyed the council. Our questions were focused on some key areas that are necessary for effective DEI strategy and action, which of course the DEI council was responsible for. So it was focused on things like understanding systemic oppression and applying equity as a tool for change, using intersectionality as a tool, which Emily was speaking to earlier as a practical tool as well. And our insights report it delivered the analysis, analytics of the findings, some visualizations, and we were able to tailor our recommendations for how the company could serve the needs of the council, who really wanted to understand where they as a group needed to upskill, what was the requirement for them to feel confident in their responsibility as a DEI council, and enhance their ability to drive change. So that was a wonderful project, and to see we've worked kind of through supporting the client then on designing and developing the training for the council as well. And so seeing that journey and the power of having that deep analysis and analytics of people that has kind of catalyzed change and confidence in their DEI leads has just been, yeah, really wonderful. So that's some of the people analytics. I'm glad you asked, Laurie.
Thank you, Ruby. I know I can't believe it's been 45 minutes already. But Ruby, are there any other ways that we are continuing to support clients through data solutions?
Absolutely. So I think, as I said at the top, what was so important for us in developing data solutions for our clients is to have a methodology that's really sound in methodological terms. I can't emphasize how important that is. Like, research methodology is so powerful when it's right, and it can take us in very worrying directions when it's wrong. So we wanted to make sure we had this grounded methodology, but that was also flexible, that we could flex in how we do people analytics, policy analytics to suit specific organizations' needs. So beyond what I've already shared, there's some other ways that we use this flexible service. So recruitment, hiring, progression, again, really using data to identify the levers to pull to attract and retain a diversity of talent and build equity into your processes and policies over the long term. Also supplier diversity. So we work to analyze and evaluate data on the diversity of suppliers and contractors and vendors, and support clients to design solutions that ensure you have diverse vendor partnerships, which is something that's been really exciting to see as coming up as even increasingly important across different kind of sectors. Inclusive product and service has been, one of my favorite things to think about how we tweak our methodology to serve. And we're working on a project at the moment to use diagnostics and evaluation to understand an organization's specific customer and consumer needs, and to better serve diverse stakeholders, we need to understand what DE&I looks like for them. And then finally, global DE&I strategy. So making sure that we have the evidence and the data and the tools to make regional DEI strategy specific and suitable for a specific region. And sometimes that means, looking at not just looking at, but ensuring that it's in line with regional requirements in terms of legal obligations and what you can and can't gather data on. So regional specificity, but also a centralized global framework that those regions feed into. I cannot emphasize how much this accelerates change and also generates synergy in global organizations. To have a global strategy that's suited for specific areas, but also is centralized so that you have kind of global DEI standards, is something that I've loved working on and really look forward to working on more. So a couple of other examples of how data solutions works as a sort of flexible service beyond the ones I've already spoken to.
Thanks, Ruby. I know I've seen some great questions come in for the Q&A portion, but I wanted to wrap up with one kind of summarizing question, which would be, if there's one reason you need to improve your DE&I data, what would you say it is?
Oh, one reason. One reason questions were so hard. If there was one reason, I think, and this is actually regardless of where an organization is on their DEI journey, if it's like at the very, very starting point, or you're like 5 years in or 6 years in or 10 years in, and you've had 3 different strategies that you innovate each year, I think this applies for all organizations. Data, comprehensive data, drives change in intentional and therefore much more effective directions. It's simply a really good investment of time and energy, because in the long term, it streamlines processes and it streamlines effort, and that maximizes outcomes. We can sometimes end up doing this guesswork where we sort of start over here and then we realize maybe there's a problem over there. And investing in evidence is what's going to get you to a really intentional directive for your DE&I strategy, whether it's day 1 or year 10.
Thank you so much, Ruby.
My pleasure.
Are we ready to move on to the Q&A section? I do just want to say, as this is a webinar focused on data, we have our own impact data form that we will be sending out to everyone. We always appreciate any feedback. So in the meantime, while that is being shared, Ruby, should I just jump in?
I'll tell you what, Laurie, I'm going to just, before I bring the slides down, I will share our QR code.
Perfect.
Folks can scan for ease. We'll also drop a link to our survey in the chat, and we wouldn't be very convincing data experts if we didn't also ask you to share some impact data with us, some feedback. Let us know how this webinar has been for you. And yeah, let's get into the questions. Let me have a look at the ones that have come in, because I will be honest, I've been looking at slides and busy talking. So, bear with me, folks. Let's see. Thank you so much for your questions. And we will try and get through as many as possible. Okay. Laurie, go for it. I'm going to let you be MC, and I'll let you decide which question you want to start with.
Great. Yeah. I think the question that I thought was a good place to start would be, how can you better understand fearless data solutions, data collection in general, when companies are early on in their journey of collecting data? So they may not have the amount of data required to truly pick up some of these insights that you've been talking about.
Yeah, great question. So I would say, if we go back to the kind of framework or the pillars that I mentioned at the top of diversity, equity, and inclusion data, I would say, thinking about where might be the best starting point in thinking across those pillars. Usually, organizations, what I've often seen is we start with diversity data. We go in and we gather data on like who's in the organization. But again, it doesn't tell you that much to just know who's in the organization, because of course, in order to understand what areas need most attention, you're going to need to understand what people's experience in the organization is. So that's kind of the inclusion data. So you might think about doing an employee experience survey, employee engagement survey, with some questions about, how do people experience the culture in the organization? Ideally, depending on where you are, the more demographic data you can include, the richer the insights are going to be, because you start to be able to connect those insights to the systemic inequities we're trying to solve. So gathering some inclusion data about people's experiences is a really great place to start. If you want to go a step further, or maybe your step 2, think about your equity data. You can get equity data from employee experience surveys. So maybe including some questions about how people experience the recruitment or progression processes in your organization, or asking a question like, do you feel like the policies in the organization serve your needs to do your job most effectively? A question like that is getting at the heart of, do people have what they need in the structure of the organization for them to succeed? And so that might start to reveal to you, perhaps there is a lack of policy somewhere. There's no accessibility policy. That might come through the response from disabled colleagues. And then a step further, so you've got your employee engagement sort of survey, then you might start to look at policies. What policies exist? Where's there an absence of policy? How might you identify where there's some barriers and opportunities to building equity into the heart of processes? So long-winded answer, but I would say the best place to start is probably not just diversity data. Think about inclusion and equity as well. Hopefully that's helpful.
Great. The next question, Emily, I think is for you, but really looking at tactical changes you may have made to data collection methodology in order to obtain that more intersectional data. So you mentioned that at first the data was anonymized. Did you change it to pseudonymized? That's how you say that word. I've never actually said it out loud. I've only read it, to obtain more intersectional cuts.
Yeah, so I think this is actually probably one for Ruby, because whilst we give over the data to her, then she does all the amazing things with it. What I will say is that obviously there's a huge data cleanse that goes on before the data gets sent over. But I'll leave Ruby to talk through what they did, obviously from an intersectional methodology perspective.
Sure. Yeah, this is a very technical question. I feel like this has come from a data expert. So yes, we anonymized we anonymized the data. We received the data pseudonymized, and then we anonymized the data, which means that we were able to still look at the demographic data and other important data points like university education, that Russell Group background piece that Emily was talking to. And we have intersectional coding models and regression models that allow us to look at joint factors together. And so what we were doing is effectively slicing the data, aggregating and disaggregating the data along those demographic lines to look at, what is the relationship between gender identity and the outcome of an application. And then we say, okay, what happens if we're looking at gender identity and ethnicity together? Are the outcomes different for Black women, Asian women, white folks who are non-binary, etc.? And so it's really using a very exciting modeling system that allows us to kind of bring that out of the data. And that required us to do, some pre-processing, sort of cleaning the data to make it really intelligible, which is something that our wonderful data analyst does, because that is beyond the scope of my expertise. So we work together, but that kind of pre-processing and making the data as functional as possible for us to do the modeling is a very exciting and technical process. So yeah, I hope that helps. We only have 5 minutes left. So Laurie, it's probably our last question.
I know.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's so many good questions to pick from, honestly. But I think one that we haven't touched much on is how important it is to look externally at what other companies are doing, especially companies in your same market sector. So is there similar market data available for talent or other companies' public diversity reports, and how should that play into what you're doing as an organization?
This is a very good question. To be honest, it depends on the company. Like, the thing about benchmarking against your sector or against other organizations that make data publicly available is the benchmark is only as good as the organization's DEI efforts are and as solid as the data is. So I think, again, focusing not just on representation, on like who is where in our organizations, which is often where benchmarking kind of takes us, but really thinking about what is going on in our organization to produce those numbers, and where can we kind of shift the dial. It can be useful to look at other companies, but again, only if they are invested in really effective strategies, and so it's kind of a difficult one to answer, because that information also isn't often publicly available. So we might just have representation data from a company. We say, okay, let's benchmark against them, but that can create a ceiling. If we say, okay, 10% increase in leadership of Black women in the next 5 years, does that mean when we get to 10% next year, we say, cool, our work here is done? But what happens if everyone that gets into that position then leaves? Do we go back to square one? And so I think what's more effective is actually thinking about creating your own metrics internally on the basis of some diagnostics. Understand how people experience the organization, what processes are working for which groups, where is there scope to create more effective process that better serves marginalized candidates, and kind of benchmarking yourself. I think it can sound like a bit of a weird one, but it's something that I've seen be really effective in sort of innovating strategy for organizations.
Thanks, Ruby. It does feel like we are closing in on the end of the hour. Do you want to try and do one more? Are we going to wrap here and have people fill out the impact survey?
I would say, let's see, do we have time for one more question? To take us to the very end, let's go for one more, Laurie, and I will try and give a 1.5-minute answer. So hopefully it can be useful.
Okay. I don't know if this will be a 1.5-minute answer or not, but can you talk just briefly about how you use intersectionality in terms of data, and what does that look like?
So I think I know I spoke a bit earlier about like the technical side of how we do modeling on certain kinds of data and the approach that we took to Amberjack's really rich data set. But the other ways that we use intersectionality as a practical tool for data and for DEI change is in sort of bringing together different data sets and aggregating and disaggregating different data sets intersectionally. What do I mean by that? If, for example, we are looking at employee experience data, right? We've done employee engagement survey, we've got reams of data and demographic data attached to that. We can look at that data intersectionally as a individual data set, but then what's really exciting is actually bring that data together with our equity data. So doing a policy assessment and understanding what are the causal relationships between policy, process, practice, behavior in an organization and employee experiences. So being able to understand, is the lack of, let's say, maybe there's a lack of a trans inclusion policy, transitioning at work policy doesn't exist. And we have experiences shared from trans colleagues who say they don't experience inclusion in the same way as others. We're able to start looking at that data intersectionally to gain much more deep insights, and we start to, again, land on sort of precise solutions. I'll stop there because we're on the hour. I could definitely go on, and I'm sorry to those whose questions didn't get answered. Please do get in touch. Send me an email if you want to kind of ask me a bit more about the questions that I didn't get to. My email is ruby@fearlessfutures, and you can also get us on hello@. But folks, thank you so much for being here. It's been a real joy to chat to all of you. Emily, thank you so much for joining us, and Laurie for being our wonderful MC. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, folks.